All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed that short video. I hope you're doing well and having a good week. Welcome to this edition of Ansible Meetup, our first one this year, so first of many. So sit back and relax. It's going to be a great session, so we have some good stuff prepared for you today. We are planning to host a few more sessions throughout the year, so not only on Ansible, but also on OpenShift, so keep an eye on those sessions. We are also talking about how to transition this fully virtual session to a hybrid. So we're experiencing maybe in-person event either in Wellington or in Auckland and broadcasting it live. So who knows? As you know, the past couple of years have been very unpredictable. So let's see. Quick introduction to the Ansible Meetup team or the NZ Ansible Meetup team. I'm Asher Benjamin. I'm an account SA based in Auckland. We also have Joseph Tihal. Joseph is our technical account manager. He's based in Wellington, and he's a very familiar face in the Meetup community. So most of you, I think, have met Joseph in the past. We also have new addition to the Meetup team. So we've expanded the team. So Nicholas Wang. Nick is our business strategy consultant. Nick, good to have you with us today and being part of the NZ Meetup team. We also have Joel Pauling. Joel is our specialist solution architect based in Wellington. Joe's key focus areas are platforms, and one of his focus products is Ansible Automation Platform. And Joel is here to help us answer some of your super technical questions. Next slide, please, Joel. Joseph. Cool. So just a couple of announcements for everyone. Our annual event, Red Hat Summit, we are hosting this virtually on May 10th and 11th. If you haven't registered, we encourage you to do so. It's an event where you get to hear from open source IT leaders on latest products, solution announcements, customer use cases, current IT trends, and so on. So we will post the link in the chat box. Please check out the available sessions and do register. You'll notice that some of the sessions, or most of the sessions, are not New Zealand time friendly, but still register. So what it gives you access to content, and it gives you access, of course, to the recorded sessions afterwards. The second announcement is for NZ NOG 2022. It will be held on May the 18th in Wellington in person. So it's New Zealand's Network Operators Group. If you haven't heard about it before, which is really an online community of network operators. So with this event, you'll get access to Ansible network automation workshops, and these are guides to automating network in different areas of DC devices, from Arista, Cisco, Jupyter, of course, using Ansible playbooks. So a really good event to attend as well, and we will post the link also in the chat box soon. So I'm going to hand it over to Joseph to go through some housekeeping, of course, and how to use this BlueJeans platform so you can get the best out of the session. Joseph, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Ash. And now hi to my, especially to our first-time joiners, and a bit of housekeeping for you guys. You can share this session with the rest of your teammates if they're not here, as everything will be recorded, and we will share the link with everyone as soon as we have uploaded them. Interactions, chat, comments are in the chat section that's on the right side of your screen. So why don't we go ahead, test that now by quickly saying hi to everyone, and tell us probably where are you dialing from. I understand we have participants dialing from Australia, even in Asia. So tell us which city are you coming from, hit those keys. And of course, we tend to forget that Meetup is a great place to make friends, make that new connection, especially now that we're slowly going back into the normality, I would say. So make use of that, chat, share your ideas, and make the session interactive as much as you can. And guess what? There's a new feature on this tool. You can raise your hand and join us live in the conversation. So you see that hand button on the right. If you raise that, it will prompt us, and you can join us on the conversation live. Q&A, of course, there's a Q&A section on the right side of your screen as well. We will try and answer those questions during the presentation or towards the end. You can also hit the like button on some of the questions that have already been posted. It will bump it up the queue. So the more like on the questions, the more popular, the more it's going to be asked. but we'll try to answer all of them, so don't worry. And of course, polls. During the session, we will create poll questions. Keep an eye out and participate in those, and let us know your thoughts. Let us know what everyone is thinking. So right, with that, I actually want to say hi to Nick. Hey, Nick, what's up? It's good to have you back on the meetup. And can you please remind us again what will be our topic for today?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about automation. And in particular, perhaps let's start with why. Why do we automate? And who do we automate for? Because why is quite contextual, right? It really depends on your situation. What you already have versus what you don't have, or what you would like to have versus what you want to have right now. And so because it's so varied, maybe perhaps we'll leave that for a separate conversation next time. But for right now, who do we automate for? Okay, so I'm going to run through a couple of case scenarios and see if you identify with these people, and perhaps play that back in your mind to your organization and how you might be able to help them with what you will see later on from both Martin and Patrick. So in our first case, the typical scenario drop, this is the new urgent, right? Mission critical. Stop everything you're doing, focus on this one thing, get it done. And then from there, we spawn a couple of stereotypes. We get the first responder. Hey, look at me, I did it. I patched my server, I did this, whatever it might be. I'm the first guy who got it done. And everyone's really proud of this person, and this person is really proud of themselves. But then there are others, right? And in our next case, we look at the can't do it. Oh, I'd love to help you. I'd love to automate. I'd love to do this, whatever this may be, except I've got this problem, and I've got that problem, and I've got this constraint and this limitation, and I don't have people who know how to do it. There's always a reason for this type of person. And then in the next case, we look at the magician. Like being a ghost. Message after message after message. It's like they left the company without telling you. And then you go, well, how are we going to bring this on this journey? How are we going to connect with this person? But yet there's a fourth type who kind of says, well, it's not my problem. It's your problem. And automation means different things to different people. And so getting that buy-in, taking them on this journey sometimes is the biggest, most stubborn obstacle that we might face. And yet there is a fifth type. And that fifth type is the white knight, right? The person who will sleep or who will not sleep or sleep minimally for the next 4 nights just so that they'll get whatever it is that we need to get done, except it's not sustainable. And all of these behaviors are supported because of the stakeholders that we'll go through now, right? The kind that just says, just do it, get it done, and then we'll go do something else. And so it becomes nothing more or less than a checkbox exercise. You just tick this box, we got it done, it's great. Or maybe you get the next kind, right? Where it's more important to be seen to get it done. And then you get a lot of graphs that come out, a lot of reporting, a lot of dashboards, but which don't materially do anything towards the effort of getting there. But let's not also forget the micromanager who comes next, right? Perhaps if I dissect everything that my team's going to do and take them through it one step at a time, that they'll get there quicker. And I think we all feel a certain way about this kind of personality. But let's not forget the last one, and that's the escalator, right? You're not going to get my stuff done, that's okay. I'm going to write to your boss, and I'm going to write to his boss, and his boss's boss. And then the reverse comes back, and they write to my boss. And then it's a non-stop escalation process. It just goes and goes and goes, and it still does not move the needle for what needs to get done. And so I'd like to just pause here while I hand over to someone who knows a whole lot about escalations and introduce you to Mr. Martin Underwood. If I can hand the mic over to you, sir, and thank you.
Certainly. I should say to everyone, Nick and I in a past life have worked together, and I miss him dearly. And one of the things that I miss about him is his incredible ability to talk almost like Kung Fu Panda about this incredibly fluffy stuff, and then leave it to me to explain what the hell he was just talking about. It's nice to meet. It's nice to be here. It's nice to meet you all. The escalation thing is maybe a bit of an inside joke. It comes from the idea that when we first started our sort of Ansible Tower journey, Tower back then, what's becoming Ansible Automation Platform, I tried to do what every good product owner does, which is, of course, my role, and do a cost of delay to try and convince people to do the right thing. And I gave this cost of delay to my boss's boss, who I love dearly, who's a fantastic gentleman. But when I gave it to him, he accused me of trying to blackmail him into buying this product. Yeah, so it's been a long journey to get here, and I think whilst it might sound very fluffy, I hope the story that we want to tell today is going to tell you about why those words are actually important. What it feels like when we went on this journey, we went through almost every single step of those personality types or those scenarios that Nick mentioned. But we'll get to the story in a second. As I say, I'm a product owner of BNZ. I've been there at about 7 or 8 years now, I think. Outside of BNZ, I am a family man. I do a whole bunch of. If you've ever done the Enneagram, which is like kind of the Myers-Briggs, one of the Myers-Briggs type sort of personality tests, I'm a textbook type 7. They call me a Renaissance man, which sounds incredibly complimentary, but probably in real terms means I'm more of a squirrel than most people in the room. I have a fantastic scale model bench at home. I've got a wonderful fishing kayak that I love taking out, the mountain bike, 2 kids, a dog, a lovely home in Lower Hutt in the Greater Wellington region in New Zealand. In terms of my professional career, I was an academic computer scientist some 25 years ago now. I've bounced between being on the tools to a BA and then a product owner, as it appears that I can talk the hind legs off a donkey. So without wanting to get too far down that track, I'm going to pass the baton to the right and introduce my wingman and champion and the actual technical do-gooder that drives my mouth, puts the money where my mouth is, Mr. Patrick Alpe. How are you, Patrick?
Yep. Hi, I'm Patrick. I've been doing Ansible for a few years now. Originally brought into the team to be a computer janitor. In personal life, it's all pretty much technology. I like my home automation. I've been using Home Assistant for 5 years. I have a home theater downstairs that I've cobbled together over many years. I like my gaming VR headsets. Got back into it in the DK2 days. Yeah, that's me.
I hope we're speaking to the real Patrick, not the pseudo automated version of Patrick.
Yep. Oh no, I did do that in a meeting once actually. When the pandemic first started, I went into a virtual whiteboard session and did the whole thing that way. Enjoying the Teams meeting.
Yeah.
You want to go, Martin?
Shall I take back over? Should we get stuck into it?
Keep going. Yep.
Now's a good time, I guess.
Yep.
Cool. So the what I want to share with you today is the journey of how we got to where we are now, and it really is all about this thing called self-service patching, which is a term that I guess me and Patrick kind of feel very dearly about, but there's a lot more to it than just patching. So to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about what we actually did, what we set up. So I hope that the more technically inclined among you will maybe get some tips from that. But I think as well, one of the key things is how we actually managed to sell this to the wider organization. And that's where I want to sort of start the journey. But I wanted to, before we kicked off, to get a feel for actually who this might be relevant to in terms of the participants. I wanted to see this little hand trick that Joseph talked about. Can those of you who are here, can you tell me by raising your hand, how many of you feel that you have achieved like enterprise-wide adoption of this tool that we're all here to talk about at the Ansible Meetup, Ansible Tower or Ansible Automation Platform? Can you, I'll give you a couple of seconds. I'd just really like to see the hands up for people who think that they've achieved enterprise-wide adoption. And let's see how that goes.
No one is raising their hand yet. I think it's a
No
very
one.
tough call. Day. That's very interesting. But yeah.
That is very interesting. That is very interesting. So I'm going to say we haven't received, we haven't quite got to enterprise-wide adoption, but we're on the right path, and that's really great because that's what I wanted to share with you about the journey.
I've got one, Martin. I've got two now. So
that's fantastic.
Two.
I'd love
to talk.
I'd love to talk with that person. Right. Okay. So let's go way back into time. So BNZ. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago. This is BNZ, the IT crowd. So back then, we are Sysadmin shop. We have a couple of teams. We've got a Wintel-oriented infrastructure team and a mid-range, aka Linux-oriented team. And it's basically the kind of the metaphoric ball that rolls down the hill, right? Like we are responsible for doing everything and anything except actually just like playing with the applications that we use. We got around, I think at that point, maybe 3,500 or 4,000 virtual machines, and a lot of services and applications and all the usual troubles that come with that. Yeah, so the key thing here is that one of the things that's coming into focus really, really badly as we're moving into kind of the times that we're in is that our patching is not that great. It is taking a phenomenally long time to get through patching services, and that is because we are reliant on huge amount of collaboration between the application owners and the infrastructure teams. Everyone's got their own schedule that they want to keep, their own deadlines. Every service is somewhat unique or has particular, whether it's version dependencies, that kind of thing. And it's becoming really, really difficult. And out of the blue, this new risk policy called the GURP, which is certainly not the role-playing game system, it is the Group Information Risk Policy, hits us. And it looks like this. And we are scared. You can see the top left there, internet-facing or Cat-A servers, an emergency patch has to be deployed within 48 hours of release of patch. And we're looking at that going, we do not have a hope in hell, right? It's now impossible. So we settle on this idea that we're going to try and move towards that. We're going to move into a 28-day rolling cycle of patching. But it's still sysadmin world. It's still, we've got these two teams. They're going to do everything for everybody. And we head off in that regard, right? But very quickly it becomes obvious that that's not going to work either, right? So in 28 days, the most we have time to do is patch the operating systems. Application patches, I think a couple of years ago, BNZ did this inventory for a data classification audit, and we worked out that there were, in the server fleet, there were 18,000 executables, which doesn't quite translate to services, but it gives you some idea of the kind of complexity of the environment that we're talking about. And it's just not possible for a small team like, mid-range and Wintel at that point are maybe 10 people in each team, and they cannot, it's not possible. And I think this is something that's common to all enterprises, right? Like it's just not possible for an old school sysadmin team to understand the intricacies of all of those different services and put together a patching regime for them that works. So we're doing something minimally, and I'm going into weekly meetings with security leadership, with NAB, our sort of sister/parent company. And I remember talking to one of the security heads at NAB, and they're looking at us going, we're doing our best. We can prove that we're doing the things that we say we're doing, but it's just not working. We're not getting those numbers down. We're not getting the number of vulnerabilities down. And that security person kind of looked at me and said, the way we're doing things is not going to work, right? So why is it not going to work? So DevOps is one of those words. It's super trendy. People who maybe have no business at the technical end of the machine like to bandy it around. and because it's a lot like Agile in some ways, like because it's really fashionable, it kind of gets a bad rep, I think. But if you break it down, like it summarizes the problem and the direction that we were needing to take really, really well, right? We've got infrastructure teams who are doing the day-to-day operations, trying to collaborate and coordinate with the developers who want to lead their own timelines and the life cycles of their applications on these machines. It is literally right there. It's DevOps. And the problem that we've got is that the day-to-day stuff that we're doing is repeatable, but as you get down to that service level, the service uniqueness comes in and the human uniqueness comes in. So it's like I say, people with their own schedules, their own release cycles and cadences, versus the people who just want to get something done right now, right? So from a technical point of view, we've got a couple of systems in play. And I think the Puppet was probably the one that was most heavily abused in those days. And I think I mentioned that because it's one of the key selling points and one of the reasons we used to move to Ansible Tower. We've got this situation. I think Puppet is an amazing tool. It's a really, really great tool, but it has one weakness, and that is, well, weakness/strength, depending on how you look at it. It's agent-based. But that means that if people want to use, to make changes to a machine that fall under the purview of something that is already controlled by Puppet, they have to know Puppet to be able to do it, right? So what do? Well, they don't know Puppet and they don't want to learn it, so they turn the Puppet agent off on their machines. And that is the beginning of a whole world of pain, because of course, we don't know that they've done that. A couple of months down the track, they've made a whole bunch of changes. If we turn Puppet back on, it's going to break a whole bunch of stuff. And we're in a really bad position. So we're starting to play, we're already coding in Ansible, we're starting to play with it, and we're familiar with Tower, and we're starting to think, great, an agentless system for doing stuff on a machine that we can control is going to help us in central patching. But then when we start to look at Tower a bit more, we start to think, right, there's an opportunity here where we can enable other people, we can empower other people to make their own decisions about when and how they patch. But we need to transfer the knowledge that's in the infrastructure teams into something that they can use, translate it into something that they can use, which is really the kind of very definition of the DevOps movement and how it's supposed to work. So we grab a Tower trial license and we start developing patching playbooks with one eye on this idea that we can move towards an idea where we're giving people bits of code to do specific jobs. And from that, we end up developing maybe a few core ideas around like what this thing is going to look like going forward, right? So Lego bricks. The Lego bricks metaphor is super appropriate now. It's fairly obvious, but there's something about Lego that I think is really important to realize when you kind of set down this path of like, we're going to give people these solution building blocks to do a job, to solve their problem that's being pushed onto them. And the first thing that's most interesting about Lego is the quality. People take it for granted, but quality is really, really important. The fact that these little bricks just always fit together and stick together, and it doesn't matter what color they are, what shade they are, or what you're trying to build, they just work. That's really, really important. Flexibility. We need to give people enough flexibility that they can do their technical process in Ansible, in Tower, but not have to worry about the minutiae of how to run infrastructure, right? The other thing about this, like learning from Puppet, we need to be able to give them building blocks that they can use in the UI without having to actually know Ansible, right? There's a certain assumption, we're taking a bit of a punt here. There's an assumption that if they're running a system, if they're running a service that's complicated enough that they need to write custom code, that we need to be able to support that code. We don't want to force them to use Ansible. We want to give them a hook that says, you write the code how you want it, but we'll give you the ability to orchestrate that into a technical process, a business technical process, the process of patching. And yeah, for that, it needs to incorporate those service specific steps. So I think it's November 2020. We've started mucking around with this thing. We've got one eye on what the possibility is, and out of the blue, our general product owner in the domain comes to me and says, "We think this is the way forward. Let's go." And 1 month before Christmas, he says, "You've got until the end of February." And our trial license is expired. And the very week after he said that, we got restructured and our team got halved in size, which was glorious. It felt like a heroic effort to get it in. But along the way, we had to do a lot of bandstanding and talking about why this is the only way to go forward. I mean, I hope that most of you at this point, probably not even just listening to me talk, but recognize that story going from sysadmin to DevOps, it isn't a matter of like a philosophy or anything like that. It's a matter of the modern world and the scaling of technologies and the sheer number of services and unique applications and bits and pieces that goes into running a modern technology shop. It just isn't possible to run in sysadmin world anymore. So you kind of got to go down this route of giving the developers the power to do the tasks that they need to in infrastructure their way, right? So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Patrick for a bit of a talk, and he's going to talk a little bit about what we actually set up in Ansible Tower. Before actually, I'll just pause. Do we? I don't see any questions in Q&A. Do we have any questions? Has anybody got any stuff they wanted to ask about that story before we move into Patrick's discussions? Cool.
You did skip a couple of slides of that, yeah?
Did I? Oh, I totally did. Yeah. So. Yes, I'm on one slide away. Joseph asked me to sort of prove it, and so I pulled out a couple of slides just to show what happened. So we started this self-service patching thing, and it was hard, right? It's really hard. I think one of the things that people don't acknowledge with DevOps is that you are asking developers to do things that they have not done before. And that is hard. That is hard. Getting people on board is a tricky thing, and I'll definitely talk about that a little later in the talk. But I wanted to show you guys this. Sorry, this slide's a bit low res, but what you're looking at here is the web interface to Rapid7's vulnerability management platform. And this was a particular machine in insurances that over time, what you saw here, like the left side of that graph is November of the year before we deployed. And it shows us doing the last central patching for a Linux machine that we'd ever do, and the risk score for the vulnerabilities going up and up and up and up and up. And then that dip right at the end, that was the first time that insurances, without any knowledge of Ansible, worked with us to learn the user interface, put together a patching workflow, and patch this machine. And it was a cluster of 4 machines, in fact. And it's a little hard to tell from the graph, but there was one really important thing from this. Before, when you go back to the left side of the graph, you'll see that the lowest point is actually kind of higher than the point afterwards. And that is because by giving the actual developers the ability to control and manage their patching and get involved with the testing, they weren't just patching the operating system, they were patching everything. And so for the first time, their vulnerabilities for CVE-related patches bottomed out. It went completely to 0. They still had some vulnerabilities that they needed to deal with, but they were config vulnerabilities that they would deal with in due course. And off the back of that, one of the things that I thought was really important, like I say, it was really hard to get people to go, okay, we'll give this a shot. But the guy who worked with me on that and coordinated with me in terms of the team wrote this. And I think it sort of sings about how good this can be if it gets done. It's really hard to get people to engage with it. But he wrote, when I got insurances on board with Tower and Ansible, it was like, one more thing we need to do. but at the end it was like, oh yeah, that's done. So people were asking us for a one-button patching process, and we went better than that. We went, actually, this is no button. Once you've got it right, once you've put that that initial outlay into getting your process into Tower, you can schedule it, and you don't have to worry about it again. And that really landed home with people. They're working on their schedule. They're working in a way that supports their application. They have complete confidence that that the patching process isn't going to break anything because they made it. And it's all, it's working for them rather than us telling them we have to do some stuff on their machine. Thanks for that, Patrick. I nearly missed out.
That's really good, Martin. And there's just one question coming from our audience, and I think it's kind of related to some of the chats that I've been watching on regarding, in terms of your Ansible patching coverage, does it covers both Windows and Linux servers? I know this is a good question because, I'll let you tell the story anyway.
Yeah, Joseph, you do know the story about this. Yes, it does. Yes. So one of the things, it does. So we have a presence in Azure and AWS and on-prem, and I mean the server fleet presence. Now, we definitely, when we started this, one of the key things I think you have to do when you do something like this is the experience has to be the same for everybody, right? So you can't say, well, to do it on Linux, you've got to do it this way, and to do it on Windows, you're transferring infrastructure problems to your consumers, and that's bad. That's bad product management. It's a bad customer experience. So we do have a separate template for Windows, but the rest of the stuff that we give people, which you'll see in a second, you'll see Patrick will show you guys the common library that we built. It does work the same way. So the process of learning to use Tower is the same. And but what I will say is, because of the speed that we had to deliver it, we weren't able to get through the security governance to say that we'd be okay to go to AWS and Azure. That's been really difficult. It's a struggle to this day. I think with we're using the upgrade to Ansible Automation Platform to springboard into getting the security governance done and get coverage there. But it is the worst thing in the world to say to people, hey, all that stuff that you've learned, it works on-prem, but where the BNZ strategy is cloud first, let's get into AWS and Azure. Oh, by the way, the patching thing doesn't work there. That was a mistake. It was a thing that we had to do out of necessity because we had to get something there. And at the point we put it in, most of our fleet was on-prem. But if any of you are trying this or think you can get into this, I can't tell you strongly enough how important it is that the experience that you give your customers is the same no matter what platform they're working on.
That's really good. Patrick, if it's all right, I'll just ask this to Martin first. You may answer on behalf of BNZ, but or your team perhaps. From success stories that I hear from various people, this is from Felice, by the way, it seems that security risks is the only way to motivate the status quo. It seems like the idea of time/cost savings is never good enough to motivate. Is this something common? Is this something that you saw, at least when you're trying to implement this as well? I mean, other participants can also answer in the chat, but that's for Martin from Felice.
Yeah, I'll answer that one really, really quickly. I think it is. The thing is, I don't think that's necessarily like it's a feature of the environments that we work in, right? Security is super important. It's the most important thing right now. It is unfortunate that the thing, it kind of has to be a stick rather than a carrot at the beginning. But I think one of the things that hopefully you'll see as we keep going through our story is that our attitude to Tower was that it was kind of the gateway drug, right? Yes, security, we're telling everybody, we've got to get this done. This has to be done this way. It has to be done by the service owners, by the developers, because it's the only way we're going to get really good patching done. And they're all going, I mean, like, I think because we're recording this and it's likely to be shared, I'll have to watch my language, but I'm sure you'll fill in the blanks. Like, one of the earliest responses we had to the call that we were going to do this was, I did my whole spiel, just like I'm doing with you guys now. And one of the developers said, that was the nicest kind of particular type of sandwich I've ever had to eat. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. It wasn't pretty, but the response we've had is once people get into this tool, if you give them the right direction, if you show them, like, if you do this, there are other things you can do with this tool, and what that means for the implementation, specifically that don't restrict what people can do in Tower because you think they're learning. Just give them the reins and be there to help them. That, I think, it'll hurt to begin with, but the benefit long term is phenomenal, because you will change the way people think about how they deploy and configure their services. More questions?
Thanks for that, Martin. There's a few more questions, but I think this would be good to ask after Patrick's slides, so I'll save it for those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All good to take over, Patrick?
Yep. So I've got just a couple of slides, and I'll be focusing mainly on what we really do have in place right now with Ansible Tower. So more the technical, what's actually in place. First of all, going back to the structure of how we've done it. So we treat our BNZ teams as customers, as Martin was suggesting, and we've made our organizations within Ansible Tower per team. So the organizations will map directly to their team name in our CMDB. Why we did that is we wanted to give them their own slice of the pie. So when they log into Ansible Tower, they have admin to their own organization bar inventory. Inventory we had to cut back admin to, purely from the security standpoint of we don't want people adding servers that don't belong to them and then running templates and jobs on servers that don't belong to them, bringing servers down from other teams, etc. But when they log into Tower, they have full admin to their own little slice of the pie. When they do log in, they are presented with what we call the common org, the common organization. So they have full admin to their own org. They also can see what's been shared to the common org. And if I can have the next slide there, Martin. This is what we have in our current common shared templates. So a fresh user logs into Ansible Tower. They'll be presented with these templates out of the box to them, and this is the Lego blocks that Martin was referring to earlier. So we have certain basic ones. I'll just kind of go through them. Check URL status, very simple. You're expecting a certain status code on the way back, good, bad, for a certain URL. We want to disable or enable monitoring, quite handy for patching. We have the common Linux OS patching. I'll dig into that in a little bit. We have some satellite recommended stuff there. We do break down in another page of what exactly these things do if people are interested in more details. The common Linux script runner. That's one thing that Martin was referring to earlier. Is what if someone comes in and they have a bash script or a Python script or something that they already use to bring down their service or do a migrate or something. They can chuck that into the Linux script runner. It will pull it down, push it out to the server, run it locally on a said server. You can specify all that. Common, send an email. That's pretty self-explanatory. Send a message to MS Teams. That one's used quite a lot for success or failed messages to someone's channel. Wait X seconds. Time's handy. Then you've got your common Windows OS patching. So that's the equivalent of the Linux OS patching. All of our documentation when it comes to using said things are the same. We expect them to interact the same. So between Windows and Linux, you use them the same way. And then the Windows script runner, it's the same thing. You could point it at a PowerShell script or something. It will push it out to the server and run said script. So the common templates, they're ready to go, self-contained kind of things. So if you click the rocket on one of them, you give it an inventory, give it a server, it will do what it says it's going to do. All these particular ones, the common ones, are pre-baked with everything you need to run, including credentials. So that's why we extremely lock down on the inventory side, because we don't want someone running Linux OS patching on a server that doesn't belong to them. Because we do know, if you have used Ansible before, Ansible can be quite scary, but we do expect people to, respect that. And as we onboard people, we do explain that, like, this can be this is a powerful tool, and you should read of what you're doing. We do have safety checks in place that they'll have to actively remove if they were going to try patch their entire inventory, lab through prod or something. But talking about we'll dig into the Linux OS patching one a little bit more, because that's of course what we first started playing with. When we talk about the Linux OS patching one, people often bring up, oh, well, that's just a yum update, and laugh about that yum update, but not quite so. So we wanted to make it a fully self-contained of what the infrastructure team had learnt about OS patching. So if I can have that next slide there, Martin, just briefly. This is the steps in general of what the Linux OS patching does. I don't expect us to read through it, but yeah, it has a whole bunch of pre-check stuff to make sure it's kind of safe-ish, to go forward. Before it starts bringing some things down, you can have the ability to create snapshots in VMware or Rev offline or online, does updates, does reboots if needed, brings things online, checks things, does baseline checks and puts them into all little config files. So yeah, the next slide there, Martin. But the idea is that you want to bring the expertise of whatever team that looks after that has the knowledge of that and put it into a common template. So I would hope, a team, like if you a standardized way to deploy some database server or something, the database team could come up with their own common template. We would validate that it meets certain standards and that it's it works across multiple different versions or of operating system or things like that. But if another team wants to make a common template, that's totally fine. And then we can share it with everyone else. So you get that list of common templates available to whoever logs in. When it comes to support of these, so the support should come down to whoever built that common template. We do have community now around Ansible Tower and around the common templates. So you can go into Microsoft Teams and we have our own little channel, and we've got to the point now where if someone asks a question, another member of another team is answering that question. So we've got that kind of nice community hub feedback going on. What's next though is workflows. So we've got all these Lego blocks and they're all self-contained and whatnot. But if we chain them together, if we can have the next slide there, Martin. If we chain them together, we get a nice workflow in Tower. This picture here is from one of our users, from one of our customers there. Apparently it's an internet banking something or other for pre-prod. It is very small and I cannot read it. But they built this all themselves, and every single node in there is a common template that you saw on that other screen. I can't entirely read it, but I will guess what things are from left to right. You'll have things like, I want to disable monitoring. I want to run a script on the server before I do patching. That's the next part. So that might be check that I am the inactive part of the cluster or something like that. Then we've got some OS patching going on in parallel. We have a post-patch script that runs. Looks like they're waiting a certain amount of time, and then we're repeating it again. So a pre-patch script running 2 servers, OS patching in parallel with reboots. Then doing a post-patch script, and then we're enabling the monitoring on failure or success across the board there. And then you can notify your MS Teams channel that I have completed dead patching or I have failed, please help me. Using all the common template Lego blocks that they've built out. On a kind of personal note that I like about this is it gives the team the ability to look at their workflow of I need to bring down part of my service, or I need to bring down my whole service, and they have to document that process. And then they have to put that process into practice every single 28 days. And it's quite a nice feeling knowing that your service comes up or goes down and up every month. That's quite a nice feeling. And it does lend itself to where we're hopefully going, which is treating things more as cattle, and building out said process and having it in a repeatable workflow. I think that's my slide, so I can hand it back over to Martin there.
It sounds really cool, Patrick, and I really love the points that you highlighted there. And in regards to those slides and the topics that you discussed, there's a few questions related, and we've been talking about this along the way all throughout, is adding intelligence and error protection. There was one question from Patrick saying, have you encountered issues that caused a big outage or incident, especially on those scheduled patching workflow, and how were you able to tackle it? And sometimes he did comment saying, sometimes it's being always up to date with security patch doesn't mean everything will work. So it's a question of security versus usability constraint. So,
yeah, we have had incidents in the past. Maybe I don't know if caused by patching is the right word. Like pretty much every single incident that's come from, oh, you caused it by patching, can you roll it back? The rollback never helps. It's always because they don't have the right process to bring this application back up, or the server restarts and they don't know how to bring it back up. Because they don't have that repeatable process. So it might take them a while to get that repeatable process down. Like they need to talk to their vendors. They need to talk to people that set it up. Like the actual patching part doesn't really like the patching of the packages don't really cause the problem. It just reveals a problem generally in process.
Yeah, and I get what you mean. Go ahead, Martin.
I was just going to say, sort of adding to what Patrick's saying, we still like it, making this sound like it's really, really easy. And there was another question there from somebody about like change management. We're still going through those processes. Like change management, I'd love to automate change management for people, but we can't, unfortunately, and you'll see my answer there. But we still have conceptually life cycles to move through. But what Patrick said is totally right. And I think there's two aspects to that I really wanted to, and it was one of them was actually something I was going to mention in a bit. Joseph yesterday, like as Patrick said, he asked about like what about error checking and all that kind of stuff. No, there is a good case to having it, and it's a great thing to have. But to be clear, if you're going to give Lego building blocks to people, they have to be that quality Lego building block. It has to work. Now, when we've seen patching break, it's not the patching that breaks. What we see is people are sitting on top of legacy hardware that they haven't touched for way too long. And that's why they're not patching. And now they're being made to patch, and they've got this tool. The idea that they've got the tool that lets them start to build a repeatable, consistent process is exactly what Patrick talked about. Like once you get there, you getting there, you find all these problems. They were problems before patching. They're not the patching that's breaking it. It's problems with how you manage your clusters and your services. And going through this process of learning actually bubbles that stuff to the top in a way that's relatively controlled and resolvable in a productive way, right? I think that's really important. We did totally, when we started, we had people that would meet me in the BNZ cafe and be like, "Oh, I hear patching broke it again." You have to wear it a bit because people will, if something goes wrong, they will totally say it's you. And the way you deal with that is you just go, it's cool, we'll help you fix it. And just subtly remind them in the background, like, you need to maybe think about how this cluster behaves, rather than point fingers at everyone else. It's a cultural thing more than anything else, I think.
It is. We have a few more questions, but I'll let Patrick and Martin answer those offline, and I'll let Martin continue on the slides for the benefit of time.
Yeah, cool. So we are touching on the things that I wanted to mention. Patrick's leaving little GIFs for me in the middle of the slideshow. This is what you get for collaborative document creation. So one of the things about this is if you're going to hit enterprise-wide adoption of a system like self-service patching delivered using the tool, people are going to be scared of it. So the first thing is, naturally, is the documentation has to be spot on. People are always tentative to say, I actually don't know what I'm doing. Professionally, that's always felt like it's a difficult thing. So your first port of call is to make sure that people have a really great documentation to get into. And one of the things I would caution against is, and I've seen it in my business and businesses that I've worked in before, is you do all this design documentation for this thing, and then a user comes along and says, I need to understand how to do such and such, where's the document? And you give them the design documentation. Don't do it. Spend time to write user-focused documentation. Think about what your users' needs are and actually write documentation for them. The second part of that is the community aspect of it. So people will learn to talk and ask questions, and they will learn to share. Use something like, for us, it's Teams. Make sure that you've got that public channel where people can ask questions. There is a hidden benefit there. We weren't the first people in our department to start doing that. That was actually the AWS and Azure teams. And after a year or two, and we're seeing it now, what you get is, rather than everybody asking the questions of your team the entire time, and you're kind of back in sysadmin land, you get a community develop, and you get people actually, as Patrick said, answering questions for each other. And they're starting to form relationships and share techniques and share code in a way that businesses' hierarchies unfortunately end up siloing people. So make sure you've got that central channel. And one of the things that we did, really, really simple, get the user documentation attached to that channel. So it's all in one place. So if they want a document, they have to go through chat. If they go to chat, they see the document. Like, it's all in that one central place. That's really, really important. The third thing is not the table GIF. Damn you, Patrick. It's the minions. The minions, to me, are like, they're a cartoon character they're always around their master. Consider yourself servant leaders and make sure that you are available to talk and work and hold the hand of the people that are going to learn this stuff. I, at one point, had to do a demo for the heads of techs for this stuff. And they were really pleased with the demo. And in a team-wide talk the other day, one of those heads of tech said, "It's so easy now." And I had to talk to him afterwards and say, "You're not recognizing that it might be easy, and it might look easy to you, but it is something that these people have not had to do before. And you need to acknowledge that. And the best way to do that is in person. Pointing people towards support channels and all that kind of stuff is great, but be prepared to go, if you want somebody from my team or a couple of us from our team to just be a part of your team to help you get over the hump of the journey, then do so. If you do that, you can get to a really good place. I think when you give people Lego bricks, if you remember, like those of you that are into Lego, like, you know, like me, I maybe I had a little toy spaceship when I was young, and that was cool, but it wasn't half as cool as the one I built myself out of Lego. And it's the same, and we've seen that. This piece of feedback was something that just pushed me over the moon. I was so happy. This, for the person that asked about patching Windows, this is a Windows user, Windows servers and .NET servers. And she wrote, "I loved writing that workflow in Tower." And I showed this to the heads of tech. yes, we've asked them to do this extra job, but it's fun. They enjoyed building their thing in Tower. We've empowered them to do their thing. We haven't just said, run this and it'll do it for you. We've given them a little bit of agency and a little bit of control over how they run their service. And that is really powerful, to the extent where this person is having fun doing their job, which is incredible, right? Like, it's huge. You just, that's an amazing thing to be able to say, I've delivered a technology product that makes my colleagues have fun at work. That is super, super compelling and super powerful. And once they start, if they start having fun with the thing, the other thing that you see, and I've got a really simple example of this, and you'll excuse the obfuscation, of course, business stuff is business stuff. When we first set people up, we didn't really mention this an awful lot about the inventories. I'd love to use dynamic inventories, but one of the answers that you would have seen is that we don't have API access to our CMDB, which is an absolute curse, and is just one of the, I'm sure various people, CMDBs, am I right? Like, they're just, we had to just basically set up a very simple inventory in Bitbucket, and we gave people what we thought was their setup and asked them to verify it. And we did this, and it was just a list of host names, right, under groups that we thought made sense from what we knew from our central patching. And then a few months down the track, we look, and this has started happening. People are using parent-child relationships between the groups. They're starting to use host variables in the inventories. We didn't teach them to do that. They were engaged with the tool, they were engaged with the platform, the process, and they started to think, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. Once you get that kind of gateway drug, like, it's a useful thing, it gives them agency, they're into it, then the ball starts rolling, and you're creating a community of developers rather than just doing a task for people, which is classic sysadmin, right? So yeah, the gateway drug thing, it's really important. And I think it kind of rounds out the discussion that we want to have today. The future for us is AAP2, Red Hat Enterprise Collections are going to help us to start building this thing. So we've got teams in their own little slice of the pie in Ansible. We've got the monitoring team, we've got our network protection team running F5s out the wazoo, and we've got Splunk and Dynatrace and CyberArk and these tools for which there are Red Hat collections. And we now have the ability to quickly develop solution building blocks that could be used in those workflows. Remember, Patrick said, like, the nice thing about the patching workflow is it represents pulling down and changing a service and bringing it back up again in a safe, repeatable manner. It's now an extra little step to start making configuration changes, start moving towards CI/CD. And even faster patching. So what we hope to do is, okay, so these teams around you, we actually had this the other day where in Azure, we found a developer who had provisioned his system in a really cool setup we've got for provisioning, but we haven't really got deployment down. And he was writing his own Splunk forwarder install script, which is a terrible thing for a developer to have to do. So we're going to go back to the monitoring team. We got into a room and said, hey, if you write the script and Ansibilize it, we can push it out through the common library, and you give people the option for a one-button click install of something like Splunk in a way that is then going to be the solution building block used around the entire server fleet. It's consistent, it's repeatable, it's something that we understand in the event of an incident because it's the same damn code that's been run every single time. So building this thing called the platform's configurator, where our consumers can just go, what do we want? Do we want CAL licenses for Windows terminal servers? Do we want internet access set up? Oh my God, the number of people that mess up proxy settings without actually dealing with the bypass list, like that sort of thing. We can put all those expertise and those repeatable steps into little Lego bricks that people can use in Ansible Tower, and they've started because they're doing the self-service patching thing. And other 21st century stuff like dynamic inventories would be great. So it's 1:02, and I'm aware that we all have day jobs. I don't know, Joseph, if you've been watching the questions, do you think there are any other really compelling questions you can address right now?
I think I think, Martin, we're happy to continue with your slides. Then I think everyone is interested to continue on with the Q&A after your slides, so we're happy to do
Cool.
that.
Well, look, I just had the one slide left, to be honest. Well, two, I guess. The Lego bricks, just to remind you, like I know it seems like a glib comparison, but think about that. Like it defines how to do this solution building block thing. It talks about quality, it talks about flexibility, it talks about agency and how involved and fun it was to build Lego bricks. Like keep that in your mind if you want to develop a system like this. The last thing to say is some of the little lessons, right? Like to take away the hook to do it, to get this enterprise-wide adoption. It doesn't have to be patching. Patching's pretty compelling, but anything that moves you into a place where people are taking control of their own services in a DevOps style is a candidate for doing this. Don't restrict what consumers can do with the tool, because you will restrict their learning. Like find ways to give them safely administrative access. I think Patrick didn't really mention it, but like one of the ways we do that is that we actually, the template for the Linux patching has garbage in the inventory. It has replace me written in the inventory. So nobody can out of the box run it accidentally on their entire inventory. They have to engage with that. It's a really simple thing, but it's a smart way of getting people to think about what they're about to do. But try your best not to limit what people actually do in the tool, because you will limit their learning and adoption. Give consumers the tools, don't fix it for them. So be present, but don't like it. So I mean this from the point of view of we have sister teams who have similar tools and they are experts in those tools. And the temptation for us as champions and developers of these tools is to just write it to show these people how cool this is if we do it ourselves. Don't do it, because you're restricting that ability for people to learn. If you're doing workflow and that kind of thing, don't underestimate automating non-technical stuff. One of the things that we'd like to do in the future is automate decommissioning. Decommissioning is a thing that involves like a dozen different teams across the enterprise, because it doesn't just mean turning the machine off. It means thinking about licensing, pure destruction, all of these other weird things around the outside. Some of these people don't have APIs or tools that you can hook up with. Totally use Ansible to send an email with the computer information. You sort of provide this incentive to actually build out automation. Like if they suddenly, if someone suddenly starts getting 57 emails with good information in them, and they go, "Wow, this is really hard. Maybe we should automate it and hook it up to Tower." That's don't underestimate having an Ansible write an email for someone. That can work. Keep the solutions common but high quality. Now, what I mean by that is obviously we call this thing the common library, and they are shared to everybody and everybody can use them. But really specifically, and this kind of goes to the last point as well, they need to be solutions that your consumers need. So remember the Linux slide? It's if you the Linux patching slide. If you read any of that, you will have seen things like NTP timesync and stuff like that. Developers don't want timesync templates. That isn't what they're into. What they want is the solutions to their problems. And in our case, that was, you guys need to patch your services. So we built a template that is patch your services. Be careful of breaking things down. Focus on solving your consumers' problems, not the infrastructure problems that you have day to day. Put that inside the template. So I think those are from the point of view of pushing this sort of capability out. I think those are the key takeaways, and that Lego metaphor. And do you have a think about that? It's a really compelling kind of way of thinking about how you can get enterprise adoption for this sort of capability. I think that's it from us.
Thank you so much, Martin. Those are really valuable and useful insights. Real life situation. I think most of us can relate to that. And thank you for sharing your learnings with us as well. I think we still have a few questions that's left unanswered. So is it okay if we do some quick fire for Patrick and Martin?
Yeah.
Cool. For you guys, is there any automation to deploying the template themselves at this point?
Not really. Meaning like, do we rebuild and change templates with our own kind of
Yeah.
development pipeline? I assume. Not really. I think that's something to look to in the future, particularly if we start to get templates that combine roles from, or not roles in the Ansible sense, but roles in the sense of team roles. It's something we would look at, and particularly because one of the things, the more people use this, I think we're going to end up with a situation where major upgrades to the platform could inherently cause problems. So the idea of, and this was a Red Hat idea, this was Mickey Shapiro, he would talk, when we first talked, he'd talk about the idea of tech preview. And to do tech preview properly, I think you would want an automated deployment, which we would need to be, you would need to tweak things very, very quickly to make sure people have the biggest opportunity to test stuff before the platform upgrade. So definitely something to think about in the future, but for now, it's pretty simple. We keep it simple.
Definitely. Thanks for that question, Alex. Another question from Patrick. How do you segregate between environments? There's like non-prod and production patching workflows.
So we kind of don't. Now, from a change perspective, there are some business processes that we have in BNZ. I think our change process, it's horrifically painful and very, very good. BNZ, we were pretty bad a few years ago, and we overhauled the change process, and it's pretty stringent now. People are really good at not accidentally prod. We do obviously have groupings of machines in the static inventories that we give people that separate out the environments. But I think one of the things about this is, and again, we haven't had problems in the year and a bit that we've been running this. We haven't had anyone make a mistake in this regard. So I think you have to trust people to do things properly and be mindful of the Spider-Man thing, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Obviously, from security and governance, that always makes them super, super frightened. But I think you should recognize that if you were to have a set of like a common library for pre-prod and a common library for prod and separate towers, you miss the opportunity to actually do those things in concert. So one of the things I've been talking to people that are doing the automated patching is, hey, look, you've got a dev workflow, you've got your pre-prod workflow, and you've got a prod workflow. All you need now is an automated test in the middle, and you can build a template of templates, and you have 48-hour patching, right? If you had separate environments, you wouldn't be able to get to there. So I think it's worth thinking about the guardrails of how to stop people from having an accident. But letting people have the power to actually develop in that direction.
Cool. Thanks there, Martin. And this is a very interesting question. I think you touched it a bit earlier when it comes to collaboration and allowing other people, other SMEs, use their expertise to automate things for you. Whiskey is asking, how did you manage the playbook or job template? Did you need help from the dev team or all prepared by the sysadmin? I think Patrick touched on that a bit. I think, yeah.
I kind of, what was that question?
How did you, I think he's asking, how did you manage or probably create the job templates and playbooks? Did you need help from the dev teams, or is it all prepared by the FCM team or the sysadmin?
So the initial common templates, it was all FCM. Yeah. What we're trying to do is get people to build the workflows for themselves. We're trying to give them the templates in those workflows as the Lego bricks, as stuff that just works. Like again, I think maybe we've touched on it a couple of times. Like Joseph asked us about error correction yesterday. If you're going to do that, it needs to work. It needs to be like the Lego bricks. The damn bricks need to fit together. We don't have error correction so much in the Linux patching template, not in the sense of the template itself went wrong, because it can't. It has to work. And it means you've got to be pretty strict about defining what the inputs to that template are, what the outputs are, and the steps that you're doing in the middle. In terms of going forward, though, it's something that we need to address. So if we're going to have people, if we're going to support Ansible and this common library concept, and people are introducing common library templates from teams outside of our thing, we're going to have some really good peer review at the code commit level, right? Like, I don't want people's patching workflows breaking because of a thing that the monitoring team gave us, and they were unaware from their testing that something broke. That peer review is going to have to be super tight, for sure.
Cool. That's very interesting as well, because I think this probably aligns to a question from Duncan saying, how do you avoid duplication and promote reuse across functions? So apart from the common libraries and common templates, probably you can talk about the plans for Automation Hub that kind of like allows sharing and avoid duplication. I know you're very interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, so
even before that, we do have a Bitbucket Git repo or project that has a whole bunch of roles that are used across BNZ. So there is collaboration at the role level.
Yeah, there is collaboration at the role level. The other thing I think is that if you were to think about the way we set up the team structure, like the duplication in the enterprise, remember each team sees their own slice of the pie. They don't see anything but the common templates, and they can't change those. Those are the things that we supply out of the box to use. The rest of their workspace in Tower looks like the rest of the organization doesn't exist, even to the extent where our team, and we sort of inherited the mantle of, we're one of two teams that inherited the mantle of the old on-prem Wintel and mid-range teams. Even our team now doesn't have access to an inventory of the fleet. We don't need to. The point here is that you've got, and I think this is a kind of service ownership thing. You've got services saying, this is our place. These are our machines. We look after them. If you have people collaborating between teams, you don't create a new team in Tower. You just say the access is for this team. Bring that person into that access group to see that silo. From a point of view of sharing code between teams is kind of up to them. There is a community aspect again to it, and it's maybe something we're only just beginning on the journey. Like the idea of going, hey, this person in this team wrote a really cool role. We should promote that into the common library. I think that's probably more a cultural thing and more about just encouraging people to share. I'm acutely aware of time, but one of the stories I think we started with when we started our team and the right at the beginning of this journey was we had this vision for what is essentially Steam, but for code and automation. So Steam, some of you will be familiar with it, some of you won't. The gaming platform, right? Like it's actually an amazing platform because there's a store, you can search that store for the things that you need amongst millions of products of varying levels of quality. And that takes you to a store page, which is a jumping point to documentation, to a community hub around that particular game, to advice on how to use or install it, what's good, what's bad, reviews, and all that kind of stuff. Like if you think about that model, like Tower can actually fit that with a little bit of stuff around the outside. Tower can fit that in an organization. You can have that repository of templates and roles and stuff and promote the things that people find useful. But you also got to handle the community side on to be able to do that.
That's really cool. I think last few set of questions, Martin, before we wrap up and hear the final words coming from you. How do you handle, I think this is an interesting question. How do you handle like DB server restarting before app service restart during the patching process? So you don't have app servers that have lost connection to DB servers. I think it's more of the process of like prerequisite and post-requisites before patching, something like that.
I think that there's, with Ansible, there's multiple ways of tackling that. In our internal documentation, we do just, if yours is slightly more complex, you should go the native Ansible way. If you need to shut down your app before and start it up after, you should probably go an Ansible native way and then plug your templates in to that workflow with the commons. But we do provide those like Linux script runners or Windows script runners. So you could chuck in a script that shuts down your service before you patch your DB or patch your application service. But of course, since it is a workflow and you can limit it however you want, you can say, I want to patch app 1 or do a failover, then app 2 or something around that, or just do application servers and then database afterwards, or database first, then applications, so then they can reconnect back. So many ways you could do it.
Yeah, I think it's not. It's totally okay for people like the developers who are playing around in the infrastructure space for the first time. It's totally okay for them to do it really. Like if you're an experienced Ansible user, you might look at some of the BNZ workflows and go, "Oh my God, that's a painful way of doing it." But that's okay, as long as it's a repeatable, consistent process. The fact that they're running the same Linux patching template like 5 times in a row, but this one they're doing such and such machines and then checking, and then that's totally okay. That works, right?
Yeah, cool. And I understand it's not just, of course, in the patching space. A lot of interests are being drawn, not just on your end, but also from network side, from the cloud side. So that sounds really good. But if I may just invite you to like just stop sharing for now, so that we can invite everyone on the screen again. So yeah, at this point in time, thank you so much everyone for staying. We still have about 40 attendees at this point in time, and personally, from the Ansible Meetup team, Martin and Patrick, thank you so much for your time. Probably just a few parting words to everyone regarding your automation journey, perhaps.
Oh, more than anything, do it, because it is a really hard thing to get enterprise adoption for any tool. But I promise you, it is well worth the pain and suffering, because you do when you give people these tools and you start to you're enhancing people's careers and their technical capabilities. You're making your business better. Like, there is no downside to doing this, and it feels great. It feels really good. There are days when people think everything is your fault, but after that, it is really, really cool.
Cool. I couldn't agree more, because I experienced it myself. Just do it, test it out, do some use cases, and of course, reach out to Red Hatters out there. We're here to help. Send us an email if you have any questions, and if you'd like to connect with other Ansible users, of course, we're more than happy to have you speak on the Ansible Meetup. And on that note, thank you again, Martin. Just do it. Thank you, Patrick, Martin, Nick, Ash, and Joel. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. See you again at the next Ansible Meetup. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.